Did you guys see this article on the New York Times? I was reading it today. It was on how political violence is on the rise in Europe. Here, I'll show it to you guys. It's pretty crazy. So check this out, guys. It says here, a spate of attacks on German officials and politicians has brought fresh worries over political violence and a breakdown of civility ahead of several critical elections this year, including in 3 states where the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, or Germany, party could make significant gains. In the latest attack, on Friday evening, 4 people assaulted a prominent Social Democratic politician who was hanging campaign posters in Dresden, leaving him with a broken cheekbone, an eye socket that required emergency surgery. Goodness gracious, guys. Things are getting pretty crazy. The official, Matthias Ecke, is running for re-election to the European Parliament. That evening, a Green Party campaigner, whose name has not been released, was attacked in the same residential neighborhood by what the police believe was the same group of people. A day earlier, on Thursday, Rolf Fliss, the deputy mayor of the city of Essen, 300 miles west, was punched in the face by a group of men with whom he has been having what he initially characterized as a friendly exchange. The violent attack on Mr. Eck drew a sharp response from Chancellor Olaf Scholz, himself a social democrat, in Berlin on Saturday. Democracy is threatened by such things, so accepting them with a shrug is never an option. We are not going to take it, and we, the decent and reasonable, are the majority in Germany, he added. Later on Sunday, thousands protested against the violence in Berlin and Dresden. At the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, politicians from mainstream parties and members of civil society gave speeches denouncing the assaults. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of what happened before Hitler took power. Seriously, that's what it reminds me of. Before Hitler took power, there was a lot of political violence that was going on. And there was this one guy, what was his name? He was this major German Jewish industrialist, and he was assassinated by a far-right activist. This was in the 1920s, 1922, I think this happened. And there were huge demonstrations protesting against political violence back in the early 1920s, guys. There were Germans who said, this isn't right, this is wrong. Listen, not everyone in Germany was a lunatic Nazi. There were plenty of people in Germany who were not Nazis, and they did not like far-right violence happening in their country. They didn't. And they did not like the rise of the Nazis that was taking place. And there was a lot of political violence in Germany, and it was a huge problem. Huge problem. But you see this sort of thing becoming more and more common in Germany. It's very interesting to see this sort of thing just blow up. It's pretty crazy, guys. But you see, for example, earlier this year, there were huge demonstrations being done by farmers in Germany. Remember that? And they were asking for what? They were protesting over what? They were protesting over government subsidies. They wanted to keep their government subsidies for their fuel spending to power up all their tractors, which is understandable. But a similar thing was happening in Germany in the 1920s. There were huge demonstrations of farmers going on in Germany in the 1920s, and they were protesting to a great extent over subsidies. They wanted government subsidies. And the Nazis capitalized on that. So what do you see in Germany today? You're seeing the rise of nationalism, rise of the far right, the rise in political violence by both the right and the left. But it seems to me that political violence is being done to a great extent a lot by the right wing. But again, you have Antifa also doing violence as well. So I'm not trying to make little of that. But the fact is that political violence is being done by both sides in Germany. And this is a sign of what? It's the sign of the rhyming of history. That's what this is. So the article goes on to say, on Tuesday evening, the interior ministers of Germany's 16 states, as well as the federal interior minister, Nancy Faeser, will meet to discuss security concerns in the aftermath of the attacks. The police have linked 4 teenagers to the attack on Mr. Ecke. So there was a 17-year-old boy who went to the police with his mom, and he confessed that he assaulted this politician. And then it says here that the police raided the homes of 3 others, all aged 17 or 18, thought to be involved in the attack. Dresden public prosecutor on Monday said that at least one of them had ties to far-right ideology. So there you go. There you go. And then there was a mob that happened months ago. It says here that a mob prevented Robert Habeck. This was the big farmer demonstration that was going on. This was the series of demonstrations, I should say, that were taking place early this year. And it says here that a mob prevented Robert Habeck, Germany's vice chancellor and a prominent Green politician, from disembarking from a ferry in January. More recently, Katrine Göring-Eckardt, another senior Green Party politician who was a deputy president of parliament, was blocked while leaving an event when 40 to 50 demonstrators surrounded her car. While most of the victims have been members of the governing Green and Social Democratic parties, the Alternative for Germany, known by its German initials AfD, has been a target. On Saturday, vandals attacked a stand holding AfD election material in Dresden. According to the party, a 54-year-old tending the stand was unhurt. The situation has been coming to a head for some time now, etc., etc. So yeah, things are getting pretty crazy. Hello, Rhoda. I'm a double quarter pounder guy. Oh, double quarter pounders are great. I think the Big Mac is probably the supreme meal at McDonald's. But you got to get the double Big Mac now. The double Big Mac is really good. The right wing is definitely rising in Europe. You are right, but people don't seem to have felt that yet. Yeah, because there's a reason why people haven't felt it. It's because everyone thinks that the sole problem in the world is either Muslims, or they think that it's Middle Eastern people or foreigners, or they think that the biggest problem is capitalists. They think capitalists are the biggest problem. So a lot of people don't really focus on the general picture of the political climate that we're living in. The general picture of the political climate that we're living in is that, yes, you have a left and you have a right-wing rift, and that rift is becoming more and more violent, and it's becoming more and more intense. But on top of that, you have to understand that ideological struggles, ideological contention, and ideological violence is a reflection of something bigger that is brewing behind the curtains. And what is brewing is a war. That's what's brewing. And people just don't want to see that. You have right-wingers who I think a lot of right-wingers are just retarded. I really think a lot of them are retarded. And by retarded, I don't mean literally retarded. I mean, their ability to perceive much of reality is retarded. And I'm using the word retarded in the sense of using a verb. Like, it has been retarded. Okay? Why do I say that? When you talk to American conservatives, which is extremely agitating for me, I just don't like talking to people about politics. Generally speaking, I do not like talking to people about politics or religion. I don't. Generally speaking, I just don't like talking about it. And the reason for this is because people have a very limited worldview. And I don't mean to say that in a way that they can't widen their worldview or it's impossible for them to see things. What I'm saying is that they have willingly limited their worldview to only a certain set of particular topics. So you have a conservative guy who thinks that Pacho down the road who's selling tacos is an existential threat to America. And then you have the liberal who thinks that trans rights is of huge utmost importance, and that for some reason, if we don't agree that a guy in a dress is a woman, that somehow this is going to threaten the lives of black people or something. You just have that level of craziness. And because people have these very narrow ways of seeing things, they just refuse to see the bigger picture. They believe in the official narrative when it comes to Europe and when it comes to Europe. I'll just leave it at that. They believe that Europe is this. They believe that Europe will never return back to the past. And I remember many years ago, there was this girl that I knew. Her father was a diplomat, or a former diplomat. And she really believed that NATO is totally controlling Europe, and Europe is just forever going to be this force of democracy. And she just could not see for the life of her that Germany could one day rise up as a great military power again. She could never see that Europe could rise up as a big military machine. And this is the case for everyone that I meet. I don't like talking to people about, I just don't. Now, I'll talk to you guys because you guys have willingly come onto my live stream to hear me talk about politics. That's different. If somebody approaches me wanting to talk about certain topics, wanting to hear my opinion, my view on certain things, that's totally fine. But the idea of just meeting people and then, wanting to talk about politics or wanting to talk about religion, I think for the most part is a huge waste of time. Because if I say, hey, do you see what's happening in Europe with what's going on in Europe? If I go to a conservative and I say, do you see what's happening in Europe? The first thing that they think that I'm talking about is immigration. They'll say, oh yeah, man, the migrants are taking over and there's a great replacement and white people in Europe are being wiped out. Like, this is the first thing that they think that I'm discussing. They assume that's what I'm referring to. And I'll say, no. I'm talking about the rise of nationalism and the rise of militarism in Europe. And they just have never heard of that before. Now, I know a guy who's an American guy who works in the U.S. military-industrial complex. He works in that world. And I remember I've known him for years. And I remember I was talking to him a couple of months ago on the phone. And I said to him, listen, I know you're probably not going to agree with me, but Europe is turning back to militarism. And he said, why would you say that I wouldn't agree with you? He says, of course it is. And I said, well, because Americans, in my experience, Americans just don't believe me when I tell them this. He goes, no. He says, I do believe you. He says, I know what you're saying is true because he says, I see what Europe is doing in regards to military industry. He says, Europe is hardcore investing into military technology. Germany is rising regardless. Yeah, exactly. I agree, yeah. American conservatives don't trust Bill Gates because he has a book called How to Lie with Statistics. Also, American conservatives, facts don't care about your feelings. I'm just looking at statistics. Yeah, that's a good point. American conservatives only put statistics and say facts, not feelings, which based on political. And the other thing that I've noticed about people, let me get rid of this article here. I don't know why I'm just staring at this article. I actually want to show you guys a video that I found today. Hold up. It's about the rise of political violence in Germany. It's only 3 minutes, so it's not going to be long.
A series of recent incidents is fueling fears about the safety and security of politicians and activists in Germany. The latest in the eastern city of Dresden was caught on camera by a DW team.
A run-of-the-mill campaign event turns ugly. A Green politician set upon by two bystanders, threatening our camera team and spitting on her.
Ey, sag mal, spinnst du?
We've joined Yvonne Mosler, who is running for local office in Dresden. Her party, the Greens, have become a prime target of political violence in recent months.
I think it's especially important in this district, where you have a lot of non-voters, to maybe motivate them again to vote and to at least show your face and to say we're here.
And this is the reason why a lot of people who are of a particular political persuasion do not like to show their faces. I've noticed this, especially with Europeans. People who have certain particular views, they don't like to show their faces because they know that if they go public, this could actually happen to them. They'll be confronted, they'll be spat on, they'll be insulted, they will have abuses thrown at them, or they will be physically assaulted. And that's a very awkward and uncomfortable position, and it can be actually a terrorizing position to be in. But this is becoming more and more normal. In fact, in the article that I showed you guys, here it is. Now check this out. This is just crazy, guys. Check this one out. I thought this was pretty insane. Maybe I'll make my mic a little bit louder here. Look what it says here. It says, according to preliminary government figures, 2,790 attacks, physical as well as verbal or other kinds of threats on political representatives in 2023 were registered with the police. So nearly 3,000 reports of attacks on politicians, both verbal and physical, were reported in 2023, roughly twice as many as were registered in 2019. So political violence is becoming more and more common in Germany, and it reminds me of what happened in the 1920s. I was going to say 1922, but yeah, in the decade of the 20s, political violence was pretty common. I think that is what Germany is heading to. It's not as bad in Germany as it was in the 1920s, but I think it's in danger of growing to that level or somewhere near that level. Good night, Robbie.
As the team moved to another area, the mood became tense. A group nearby shouted a banned Nazi slogan.
I mean, it's pretty crazy that in Germany you have people screaming Heil Hitler. I think it's illegal to say that in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. But you look at this woman's face, I mean, come on. Guys, you look at this woman's face, I mean, she looks pretty horrified. She looks pretty concerned, to say the least, that someone is screaming Heil Hitler. Now, if I was in Germany and I heard someone screaming Heil Hitler, I'd be pretty worried too. That's a crazy thing to say in Germany. In the middle of Germany, that is an insane thing to say. But it shows you people are becoming more and more emboldened.
And support for the far-right AfD party. Then this happened.
Down with this rubbish.
Weißt, dass du die
You know
Strafe
you're breaking the law.
Was soll das?
Why are you doing this?
The funny thing is that this guy actually could pass as a Middle Easterner. He could pass as somebody from Iran or somewhere in the Middle East. I've noticed that a lot of the racist Germans have dark hair and dark eyes. I've noticed this. A lot of the racist Germans that I've seen on video aren't blonde-haired and blue-eyed. A lot of them are dark-haired, dark-eyed people, and I guess they're closer to that more native Celtic race of people who lived in Germany before the Germans came from the north, because Germans aren't fully Germanic, believe it or not. Ancestrally speaking, they're a mix between Celts and Germans. And yeah, a lot of the racist people I see in Germany, they have black hair. They don't have that idyllic Aryan look that the Nazis glorified so much. But yeah, and look at the Nazi leadership, by the way, of the Nazi party back in the 1920s and 30s. A lot of them aren't blonde.
Down with this rubbish.
Weißt, dass du die
You know
Strafe
you're breaking the law.
Was soll das?
Why are you doing
Yes, I heard that maniacal laugh afterwards. I noticed that as well.
this?
While Morsler documented the evidence, another group started heckling her and her team, calling them pedophiles.
Oh, this is another thing that I've noticed that's quite common in political discourse nowadays, is that you just call your enemy a pedophile. Like any politician that you disagree with is a pedophile. That's another thing that I've noticed. Now, if you have evidence that someone is a pedophile, then yes, you should confront that person and report them. But a lot more people are walking around just willy-nilly calling people pedophiles. And I've noticed that. Say, oh, this guy, well, he's a pedophile. This guy, well, he must be a part of a pedophile network of some sort, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, what evidence do you have? Now, if you have evidence that someone is a pedophile, I don't give a damn if it's a famous actor or if it's the president or if it's the Pope himself. If you have evidence for it, then by all means say that the person is part of that evil action, or participates in that wicked and demonic action. But I notice a lot more people just becoming very comfortable just accusing people left and right of being pedophiles without even having evidence. That's one thing I've noticed. Now, when you look at the Vatican scandal, plenty of evidence of high-ranking Vatican officials being pedos or enabling pedophilia or pederasty. Plenty of evidence for that. You should, now, the greater the claim, the greater the evidence that is required. And I've seen people do this sort of thing. Well, they'll say, well, this guy's a pedophile. And I'll say, where's your evidence? And the evidence is little to nothing. Or if they provide something, it's very it's one of those things where it can be it could be someone else, right? So I remember there was a situation where some guy accused Justice Roberts of being a pedophile. I think it was Roberts. Yeah, someone accused Roberts of being a pedo, and I said, well, what's your evidence? And he said, well, there's a guy on the list for those who went to Epstein's Island, and his last name is Roberts or whatever. It's like, well, that's not evidence. Yeah, the Epstein client list, right? But what's Justice Roberts' real name? I'm sorry. What's his full name? Justice Roberts. John Roberts. Yeah, John. Yeah, somebody accused John Roberts of being a pedophile, and I said, "What's your evidence?" And the guy said, "Well, on Epstein's list, there's a guy named John Roberts." John Roberts is by far a very, very common name in the United States. So I'm thinking, okay, but that's not evidence. It's just not evidence. So a lot of people are just saying, "Oh, this guy's a pedophile. That guy's a pedophile. This guy's a pedophile. He's a pedophile." Oh, how do you know that? It's the same people who come around. They say, oh, Obama's gay. How do you know that? Well, some guy said so. That's not really evidence. Or Michelle Obama's a man. Or Obama's kids, those aren't really his kids. That's another one I've heard. Well, how do you know that? Well, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Obama, his real father actually is this guy, some communist in Hawaii or whatever. What's your evidence for it? I like to see serious evidence. I'm not saying you're wrong. You could be right. You could actually be right. I will concede that. But I want to see serious evidence. It's like, it's like if someone comes up to me and says, IDF soldiers came and they just slaughtered a whole Palestinian crowd of people. What's your evidence? And I'm not saying you're wrong. But if I don't see serious evidence, I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to accept your claim. So the greater the claim, the greater the evidence required. That's all I'm saying. Et cetera, et cetera. Why? Okay, let's watch the rest of this.
They decided it was best to retreat.
Man merkt ja auch, dass die Argumente,
Well, you see that the arguments are not founded, but it's something they've picked up somewhere.
was irgendwo aufgeschnappt worden ist. Also habe ich jetzt auch noch nicht gehört.
I hadn't heard this one before, actually. It's a new one for me. But yeah, we'll keep on fighting.
Aber wir kämpfen weiter.
But they don't get far before they're
Oh, here
confronted.
they come. They're back.
Delete that picture right now.
Camera off.
Turn the
I
camera.
swear, almost every right-wing German I've seen does not have that glorified Aryan face that the Nazis praised so much. They don't have it. This woman, she has this woman, a lot of right-wing women in Germany they don't look attractive. They have masculine features. I don't know what it is with them, but they look like a lot of the girls I used to see when I was going to school in Texas. I lived in a very ethnic German area, and a lot of the girls had this look. They had this look. And it's not their fault, but they have a lot of they talk in a masculine way, and they walk in a masculine way, and they don't look attractive. Ted, what do you think about the whole war in Iraq? Man, you should have come an hour ago. I was talking about it already. Obviously, the Iraq war was... I'm not gonna... Just wait a second. Let me finish this video.
Off.
Ruf mal bitte irgendwie.
Can someone call the police?
You delete that photo, you bloody green.
Ey, sag mal.
Oh, man, spat on her face. Damn, dude. People are vicious.
Are you crazy?
Now, listen, if you disagree with somebody's politics and you confront them on it and you argue with them, that's fine, right? If you confront them, question them on their politics, not in an asshole kind of look, an asshole way, but you just disagreeing with somebody is totally fine. You should have every right to disagree with somebody. You should have every right to debate with a politician and question a politician, but to walk up to somebody and spit on them is disgusting. Like, listen, I don't agree with everything that Israel does. I think Israel does things that's atrocious. I really do. But I saw a video recently, and I can't play it on the stream because it's against TOS, but there was a video that came out recently. You can find it on Twitter, of some guy walking up to an Israeli businessman who was doing deals in Egypt and walked up to him. You can find it on video. Walked up to him and said, shalom from Gaza, and just filled this guy up with lead. just straight up murdered this Israeli businessman, murdered him right there. And there were people on Twitter. What's so crazy is that there were people on Twitter that were praising it. They were saying, oh, yes, death to the Zionists, evil Zionists. Here's what makes the whole pro-Palestine thing fall on its head. Okay? And I wish that everyone who's critical of Israel would do this. I wish that people who are critical of Israel would just come along and say, listen, Palestinians, they do messed up stuff. It's a fact. And a lot of the negative response to Palestinians is due to actions done by a good number of Palestinians. And I wish people who are pro-Palestine or people who are critical of Israel would just say this. Like, Palestinians do messed up things. Palestinians aren't all angels. They're not. But instead, they see the video of some guy getting murdered and they'll say, this is great. When people who think that you're a terrorist or that you're pro-terrorism are being confirmed in their opinion. Their opinion is being confirmed by you. I don't know if you guys realize that or not, but you guys sound like terrorists when you talk like this. I prefer the position of when Palestinians do things that's messed up, I will acknowledge it, just like I acknowledged October the 7th and never made any excuses for October the 7th. You won't find any video of me making excuses of what happened on October the 7th, because what happened on October the 7th was inexcusable. At the same time, I will criticize Israel for certain things. Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. I think that's reasonable enough. Falco Vaughn says it was an Israeli spy. Okay, please. You could be right. Right? It could have been that Israel said, "Hey, let's kill an Israeli guy in Egypt to increase hatred to Middle Eastern people or increase hatred to Muslims or Arabs." That is entirely possible. I would like to see evidence. And if you should show me enough evidence for it, I'll believe you. I'll believe what you just wrote right there. I don't have a bias. Well, I do have some biases, don't get me wrong. I'm human, right? But I've read about false flag attacks. False flag attacks happen. They're real. If you can show me evidence that an Israeli spy murdered that Israeli businessman, and I look at the evidence, I verify it, I see how if other sources have corroborated that evidence, then I will concede. But I would like to see that, because that is interesting, right? If that is indeed, if you have seen evidence for it, that would be interesting to see. Yes, pedo is thrown around to the left and right without any evidence. Yep. I know. It gets annoying. The guy who was killed is said to be the spy. The guy who was killed was said to be the spy. Okay, could you show me evidence for that? I would like to see that. Masculine bone structure, part of the German DNA. Somebody said something. It's called the Brunhild look. Okay, let me look this up. Brunhild. Yes, so Germans are... the German look is, I would categorize it in two different ways. I would say that there are two different types of German looks. There's that blonde-haired, blue-eyed, idyllic look, and then there is the more masculine-looking, almost Middle Eastern-looking German. And you also have Germans who have slanted eyes. I've noticed this in some East Germans. I will see that they have. I've noticed that some East Germans have almost a Mongolian or Asian look, and I think that is due to the Hunnic invasion of the Germans that happened back in the Middle Ages. The Huns. I know for a fact that the Huns invaded Austria, so I think some of their DNA got mixed in there.